Well, let's talk to Seyed Mohammad Marandi, who's an advisor to Iran's negotiating team. Thanks ever so much, for coming on the programme. Now, we're hearing this agreement is closer than ever. If that's the case, when can we expect this to be signed off?
Well, a lot has been achieved over the last 7-8 months. And the text that the Americans and the Europeans had envisaged back then is very different from what we have today. The Americans and the Europeans were forced to concede a great deal with regards to guarantees, with regards to sequencing, verification, and the sanctions regime. But we have to remember that Iran has a very, very problematic past with the United States and the Europeans when it comes to the JCPOA. From the very beginning, Obama violated the deal, and of course Biden was his vice president. Those violations were systematic in the U.S. administration. The attempt was to prevent Iran from being able to benefit from the deal as much as possible, and those were clear violations, preventing banks, financial institutions, shipping companies, and other major entities, oil companies, from working with Iran were all clear violations of the text of the deal itself, where the United States was to facilitate the normalization of business and trade with Iran. And then, of course, Trump tore up the deal, and Biden, though criticizing Trump during the presidential campaign, we see that he pursued the same maximum pressure policy where he targets ordinary Iranians, just like Trump did. So with that past, the Iranians want to make sure that the United States can't repeat history without paying a price for doing so. So the text as it is has had a lot of elements within it to make it costly for the Americans to leave. But the Iranians still believe there are 2 or 3 issues that need to be resolved so that they can be comfortable with the deal and be confident that the deal will be implemented in full, unlike what we saw in the past.
Do you get a feeling there's a sense of urgency from Tehran, that there's a timeline on this, that they'd like to get it done in weeks, in months? In terms of the guarantees that Tehran's looking for, what's the timeline?
Well, the Iranians would like to have a deal as soon as possible, but the Iranians want to make sure that they don't fall into the trap of a bad deal. If the Americans have the sort of loopholes that they're looking for, the Iranians have no doubt that the Americans will use that ultimately to undermine the deal, because that's exactly what the Americans did in the past. If we expect the Americans to behave any differently, we would be very naive. So Iran has not demanded anything that goes beyond the JCPOA. Iran has not demanded anything that is beyond the scope of the authority of the current sitting president of the United States. What Iran is demanding is the full implementation of the deal. We have to remember that, as I was saying before, when the United States was violating the deal, and after the United States tore up the deal, during that whole period of time, Iran was abiding by all of its commitments. And the International Atomic Energy Agency said in 15 separate statements that Iran was in full compliance. So the side that has to convince the other side that it's being honest is the United States and, of course, the Europeans, because even though the Europeans nagged and complained about Trump's policies, they obeyed Trump from beginning to end. They sanctioned Iran just like the United States, out of either fear for Trump or out of a sense of traditional solidarity with the United States.
Mohammad Marandi, pleasure talking to you. Thank you.